Excited you're here joining us. We wanted to talk a little bit today about probate and what that is and the process and what that means. Both April and I are probate specialists. We've gone through some additional education and training on how to do that and have both worked with several buyers and sellers in this aspect. So we thought today we would just talk to you a little bit about probate and what that means. So for everyone out there, Wyoming is a probate state. So what that basically means is that everything has to go through a court supervised transfer of assets from a deceased person to an heir or beneficiary. So the court has to supervise all of that. So we have attorneys involved and courts involved. And it's actually a pretty streamlined process. And I've done multiple transactions with this, and I've learned a lot working through that. Some of the things to consider when you think, are we going to have to go through probate if somebody dies or whatever, there's 3 criteria to put a property or assets into probate. The first one would be if the assets amount are equal to more than $200,000. And so as real estate agents, we come into play for that because we help find value for properties. So I know that I have attorneys reach out to me oftentimes, almost weekly, depending on the time of year and stuff like that, and ask for ballpark figures on how much a piece of property would be, how much land would be, or a house would be, so they know if this is going to have to go to probate or not. It would also need to be a sole heir, so something that would have a husband and wife on title, and the husband passes away, the wife would not have to go through probate because she's already on the title.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if there's a sole heir, so if it's a husband passes away and then a wife passes away, then it would have to go through probate because it would go to their heirs from there. The property that we're talking about has to be in Wyoming to go through probate here in Wyoming. And then it also need to be able to, or have transferred through a non-probate transaction like a living trust or a joint tenancy on the deed. So that's how something goes into probate and what we talk about when we say it's a probate state. So, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What are the steps of probate?
Well, here in Wyoming, there's 5. You need to file the will. So in order to do that, you need to go to a lawyer and make sure you have your death certificate of your deceased family member with you, and they'll file that with the courts. Mm-hmm. And then step 2 is notify all beneficiaries and any creditors. So there may be you didn't pay off your roof that you had replaced, or any sort of debt you may have against the property. And then this is where we come in, is we identify and value the house. And then step 4 is paying off the debts and the taxes, because you'll have taxes still left over regardless. Mm-hmm. And then after that, you'll distribute the assets once the house is sold. So those are the 5 steps that I can think of.
Through probate, yeah. And we come in after, like you said, after they've gotten a hold of an attorney, and they have to value the property. And once we determine that any real property, so we're talking about homes, land, real property, if those assets equal more than $200,000, then we come into play. And the actual client, the heir, the beneficiary, would hire us as a seller's agent in most cases to work through the process with the attorneys and the title company and the court system to get the house sold. And so that's where we have had to have some extra training and experience in that process to become well-versed in how we do things with
Well, and
that.
I think that's the benefit of having an agent who is a probate specialist, is they know the steps, they're able to meet with the lawyers, and they know the process, so it makes that whole transaction go a lot smoother than it would if somebody hadn't had that.
Absolutely. Well, and I know when I started out and I would come across a listing in our MLS that said houses in probate, I was kind of like, what? I don't know what that means. And it's very scary when you first see that, and if you don't have any experience with that. Now that I'm on the other side of that, it's a pretty simple process. And as long as you have somebody who knows what they're doing, they can help guide you through that. So.
Well, and I think that the benefit of it too is sometimes as an agent, you're going to have to go to the courts and prove value. And if you don't know the steps, it can be a little overwhelming as an agent to have to prove that value or work with those attorneys when you're not familiar with these 5 steps that we just talked about.
Yeah. Well, and something along those lines I just thought of too is when we are trying to determine value on a property that's in probate, we have to provide that value based on their death date. So I had a situation where I had probate, and the people who had whose estate it was, the estate of, they had passed away like 7 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So having to go back and find information and the comps I could use to determine value on a home where the person had died 7 years ago, that was a bit of a challenge. And then we also had to determine in that time frame, 7 years, what the fair market rent would have been on that property for a family member who'd been living in it.
Wow.
So there was
Yeah.
a lot of steps in that probate.
Yeah, that's
so
interesting.
you really do have to be able to know where to find your information and get your stuff for that. So it can be a challenge.
Well, and I was in one where we had gotten an appraisal done and we couldn't sell it for what that appraised value was and had to go to the courts and prove why the uniqueness of that property, why it wasn't going to sell it.
Yeah.
The appraised
Explain
value.
why it came in where where you
Yep.
came in at. Yeah.
Well, and it was on the market long enough that also, a house is only worth what somebody's going to pay for it.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't. An appraisal still was helpful to value that house, but
Yeah.
we had to prove why we couldn't get that value. So.
Well, and that leads me into the pros of going through probate. So that'd be one thing, is you do have the courts looking out for you in a way. And so something we had talked about is you've got multiple heirs or beneficiaries who are going to be getting some of the value or some of the money from an estate. Having a court being able to kind of mediate that is huge.
Yeah.
And then also to make sure that you're getting the fair value for your home.
Yeah.
That what it's consistent with the market and consistent with where we thought it was going to be. That's a big deal.
Well, and as an agent, we also become a mediator in that process too.
for sure.
You're dealing with a lot of emotional things.
Absolutely.
In that, your parents or your family members passed away, and now you're having to determine what you're going to do with the house and their belongings and things like that.
Absolutely.
So know as a buyer, if you're purchasing a probate property, just be a little bit patient. You're dealing with a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
And that's the benefit too of having a probate specialist sell the home, is they're able to keep that transaction going.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what you're doing, you can delay the closing dates, and you have to go to court, and we're on the court's timetable at that point.
Absolutely.
Not our
So
own.
that would be a con sometimes. Is on a normal home, we assume escrow is going to be, 30, 35 days. And on a probate case, you could be 45 to 90 days.
Yeah.
Sometimes longer if it's really messy. But typically the courts can get us in and get that final approval within about 45 days. So we always have to let buyers, agents know when they come in, or they want to show our properties that are probate that that's the case. And so to make sure that our offers reflect that appropriately.
Yeah, clear communication is
yeah.
definitely the benefit there between agents, lawyers, everybody. Just clear communication. So
Yeah. Well, and I think as a probate specialist, and I've done several listings in probate, I have been all over the board with this. I've had clients, heirs, beneficiaries who live out of state and have never actually seen the property. So they're really reliant on us to be able to give them good information. We've got to be aware of the property and get to know it. We have also, in my case, done everything from top to bottom. When people have been out of state, I have organized cleanouts. I have cleaned out houses. I have painted houses. I have all the things hands-on to make that home ready for market.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into it.
one thing I found is when I do have a probate selling, sometimes the family members want to update a little bit in order to get more value out of it. And that's always, they're asking, what can I do in this so I've had people replace flooring or finish basements or update, because, some of these houses are older and need those updates in order to even
and they rely on you to be able to tell them if it's worth it or not, to put that money into it, right? So it's really important that we know our stuff when we're going, any home that we're going to sell, but definitely probate, because there's some extra emotions and stuff involved in that.
Yeah.
So,
and during the probate process, there's things that still need to be paid for, taxes, the utilities, things like that. So family members need to be aware that there's still going to be fees that they still need to cover during that time. Yeah,
absolutely. And I do know in several cases I've had, that's been a bit of a stressor, because somebody passes away and they become the personal representative for an estate, and they are responsible for paying those bills. Like your electric bill's still on every month and all these. And so those are some things we try to take into account when we're pricing a home. How fast can we get this sold for them so they're not having to continue paying for all those extra expenses for too long? So,
so definitely encourage your elderly or family members to go and get into the lawyers and get your home. What am I trying to say here?
Get it into the process already, I guess, ahead of time. Get your will laid out. A trust is wonderful.
Yes.
And the same attorneys that would work you through probate would be able to do trusts for you. Because if it goes through a living trust, then you can avoid having to go through the probate process.
Yes.
If not, you will have to go through, your heirs will have to go through the probate process.
Yep. So plan on going through the probate process sometime in your life,
Yeah.
because it's going to happen regardless
Yeah.
if you want to or not.
Well, and for some people, I have one right now, a case where they had a house and we have land both in the same estate and in different areas. And so we've priced those out. We've got them on market. And he was joking with me that this is the third family member that they have been responsible for in probate. So put as the personal representative, this is the third time they've done it.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never personally had to go through it.
No.
On a personal level, but I know sometimes you're going to do it more than once. So
Yeah, I've worked with a family on several different properties. Their family, their fathers and mothers have passed away, and met with all the kids. And I mean, it's definitely highly emotional.
Absolutely.
You got to try and mediate and keep everybody kind of at this instead of heightened. And so it's definitely I think the training we went through was definitely worth going through to learn how to manage those emotions. And
yeah, I think so too. I think when we talk about the emotional side of it, you are dealing with people who have lost loved ones, and it can be someone that was expected and some that weren't expected, and so you've got the emotions with that. So as an agent helping them through that process, you've got to be very sympathetic to that.
Yeah.
Right? To help them. I had one situation where the family member had not been back to the home in 5 years, and mom had passed away, and she emotionally was like, I cannot even go through it.
Yeah.
She couldn't even come in. And so we ended up going through the house and getting rid of anything that we didn't feel would be valuable enough to sell or whatever. And then we did keep a couple boxes full of pictures and things like that. And she did come back about 3 months after the home was sold and got those things.
Yeah.
Which was pretty, on an emotional level, pretty amazing. But she just emotionally said, I cannot even go into the house.
I actually really enjoy probate properties. I just feel like it's a service that is, I don't know, kind of a blessing to be able to help somebody through that process.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think it can be very scary for someone going through it.
Yeah.
Because not only are dealing with real property, but there's other things that are going to be involved in that. You've got life insurances and things that the lawyers are going to be able to put all together for you. So we just help with the real property part of this, but it can be pretty rewarding when we do that, I think.
I agree.
So
I really enjoy working with probate properties.
I do too. Trying to think of some other things that we had talked about. So the timeline on probate, like I said, could take anywhere from 45 to 90 days. It's typically where I have seen it. So when I have a client going into a home as a buyer's agent, I try to make sure that they're very well versed on our timeline.
Yes.
We can still do inspections. We can still ask for repairs. We can still go through the process we would do on any other house. We just need to understand that our closing is probably going to take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So we have to be patient. And then we also need to recognize, and hopefully the seller's agent has listed in that listing information about this, but oftentimes family members don't want to have to do any work on a house. They just want to sell it as is.
Yep.
So on a selling agent side of that, we need to be real communicative with our sellers on what's going to come up in appraisals. If repairs are going to come up, if what we're dealing with, like we have health situations here in Cheyenne with the roofs, and so they need to know the roof thing is probably going to come up no matter how you decide you want to sell the house, right?
Yep.
So things like that. And then as a buyer's agent, just let them know as we walk through the process who they're dealing with on the other side of this. If they're dealing with family members, beneficiaries, heirs of the estate, they are going to have emotions involved, but they're also going to have different feelings about that property than if it was their own personal home.
For sure.
So just something to work through with probate. So anything else you want to say on probate?
Well, and I was just going to say, as a probate specialist, I usually try not to list it until we're at a certain point. Until we've already gone through the courts, we're at a point where we can sell it, so we're not delaying that closing.
Yeah.
So if you're not a probate specialist and you're listing a home, don't jump the gun.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're just doing a disservice to those sellers and the buyers by having to prolong the transaction process. So.
Well, so that reminds me again too of how important it is that our relationship with the attorneys is right on, because we communicate with them. How it usually works is the attorney will reach out to us and say, we need value on this property. Can you get that for us? So in our role, we'll go out and do a broker's price point, right? Opinion, a CMA, a market analysis on the house from the day of death. get that back to the attorney. If it's over $200,000, they will begin the probate process and have to wrap that all up. And then once that home is ready for sale, they usually give their clients our contact information. Now, those clients don't have to use us, even though we provided that market analysis, but we hope they do. We're already familiar with the house. The clients will reach out to us and they hire us. So it isn't the attorney that hires us, it is the client that hires us. And then we work through our contracts with them, our listing contracts with them. We provide all that information back to the attorney so they understand where we're at and what's going on. And then once we get a house under contract, once our sellers have accepted an offer, we turn that information back over to the attorney, and that attorney then takes it to the courts. And we have to wait for their schedule. Usually it's within a few weeks they can get us on court on their docket, and then that judge will review the offer and make sure it's appropriate. And they're looking to make sure that we're keeping in line with value, that we're not selling it for too far under, that everything on the terms on the contract are all appropriate for the sale. So it's really nice to have an advocate in that. Is as a seller, as an heir, you've got a third, I guess, line of defense there to make sure that you're getting taken care of through that process.
Yep,
So.
and it will be in the MLS. We have a section that has notes for just agents. So if, like, for some reason you can't get into a property till a certain time of day or something, but that will also be in that it's a probate. So we always have to be forthcoming that the house is in probate. You'll never not know the house is in probate. So
as an agent, so as a seller or buyer's agent, you do need to look out for that. When you go to show a home. Anything else on probate you can think about?
No, I don't think it's a negative thing to purchase a probate property.
I don't either, actually. We have personally bought 2 houses that were in probate that we found because the connections through that, and it was fine. And we actually got them closed under 45 days, both of them, and it was an easy peasy process being a buyer on that side of it, and it's been great. So as a buyer, I would not hesitate to look at houses that are probate.
For sure.
Unless you're trying to get moved in right away. That'd be the only problem, because you're going to have to deal with that.
Hopefully the seller's agent is on point and done all that they need to do to make that process smoother. So that's why I encourage you to hire a probate specialist to sell your home that would be in probate. So.
Well, and the connections we have too are huge. You know, I have wonderful connections, people who do estate sales. I've had several that have done estate sales. Cleaners. Yeah, we have handyman who get in, contractors, absolutely, to help get that house ready. Because sometimes tackling a house that's in probate can be a big deal, right? And a lot of work. So we definitely have those connections and can reach out and help.
I just met, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
I just met with that family that I was telling her I'd done multiple and met with them, and she was like, the best thing we did with my dad's house was hire that cleaner. I didn't have to worry about it. And I actually sold that house before it even went on the market because I was able to get in there and video and things like that for a buyer that was interested in that area. So.
Well, and I have found with probate, oftentimes the neighbors are kind of watching the house.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Yes.
So you reach out to the neighbors, the people around the house, and I've sold one to a next door neighbor before that had come in as soon as they saw I was there, saw my name tag and that I was there, they came and approached me, and as soon as we were ready to hit market, they were ready. And so sometimes you've got people already kind of looking for houses and seeing that. And so as an agent, just knowing that can be a huge advantage, getting things done quickly. So I will say here in Wyoming, the attorneys that I have worked with through probate have been wonderful.
Oh, amazing.
I have 0 complaints. They have been great. They have been wonderful to work with as we work between them and the title company, getting all the paperwork taken care of. And they've been patient with me as I have learned more through the process, which I appreciate. And I'm really grateful for them sending business our way and trusting us and helping with probate.
Well, and I think they probably feel the same way we do, that it's a privilege to be able to work probate with people. So
I think so too. Anything else on probate today?
Nope.
Okay.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Well,
Thanks,
thank you.
guys.
Have a great spring break. We'll see you later.
Enjoy this cold weather.